When my son pushed me aside to give my seat at the table to his wife's father, I never imagined that I would change his entire life in the next 24 hours. I was just a 64-year-old father who had built a business empire from scratch. But that Christmas Eve, I decided it was time to teach him a lesson about respect and consequences. When Peter woke up the next day, 47 missed calls were waiting for him, and his life would never be the same again. But before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. My name is Victor Mendez, and for nearly 4 decades I built from the ground up the largest construction company in our city. When my wife Carla passed away 6 years ago, my only son Peter became the most important person in my life. That's what I thought, at least until that terrible Christmas dinner. The afternoon of December 24th started with so much promise. I arrived at Peter's house carrying carefully chosen gifts for my beloved grandchildren, Matthew, 15, and Julia, 12. In my bag, a special bottle of wine that cost over $1,000, saved to celebrate with the family. The house was beautifully decorated. Golden lights illuminated every corner, and the aroma of roasted turkey filled the air. Everything seemed perfect. "Grandpa!" my grandchildren shouted, running toward me. Matthew, already taller than me, and Julia, who still hung from my neck like when she was little. Those sincere hugs were the only moments of true happiness I would experience that night. Camilla, my daughter-in-law, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I always felt something artificial about her, as if every word or gesture was carefully measured. "It's good you arrived early, Victor." Peter appeared from the kitchen, but his greeting was strangely mechanical. "Hi, Dad. Leave your coat there." I noticed something different in the atmosphere, a palpable tension I couldn't identify. The table was set for 8 people, but we were only 6. "Are we expecting someone else?" I asked, observing the extra places. "Yes, my parents will arrive any moment," Camilla replied with that same rehearsed smile. She was referring to Helen and Richard Vasconcelos, a couple I knew well from business circles. Richard, in particular, had always competed silently with me in the business world. When the couple arrived, Peter transformed completely. His posture changed, his tone of voice altered, becoming excessively attentive. "Mrs. Helen, Mr. Richard, what a pleasure to have you here. Please come in." It seemed strange to me, but I decided not to comment. After all, it was Christmas, and I wanted to enjoy the time with my family. We sat at the table, and I took my usual place at the head, next to Peter. That's where I always sat since Carla passed away and the celebrations had moved to my son's house. But when Richard approached the table, I realized Peter was looking at me with an expression I'd never forget. Cold, calculating, indifferent. "Dad, I need you to change seats." I was confused. "What?" "This seat is for Mr. Richard. He's our guest of honor." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "Peter, I've always sat here. This is my place in the family." The tension was almost palpable. Camilla looked at the floor, visibly uncomfortable. The children stopped talking. Richard remained standing, observing the scene with a mix of discomfort and something else I couldn't identify. "Dad, don't make it difficult. Get up, please." "I don't understand, Peter. What's going on?" That's when it happened. Peter approached, put his hands on my shoulders, and pushed me with such force that I lost my balance. My 64-year-old body couldn't resist the shove, and I fell heavily to the floor in front of everyone. The silence that followed was deafening. The children shouted my name. Camilla covered her mouth with her hands. Helen seemed horrified. Richard remained motionless, but in his eyes I saw something that chilled my blood. Satisfaction. "This seat is for Camilla's father." "Go." Peter's voice sounded unrecognizable. From the floor, humiliated and in pain, something broke inside me. Not just my dignity, but something much deeper. The image I had of my son, the unconditional love I felt for him, crumbled like a house of cards. Matthew and Julia helped me up. Their faces reflected confusion and pain. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" Julia asked with tears in her eyes. "I'm fine, dear," I lied, stroking her hair. But inside, a storm was beginning to form. Peter had already taken his place at the table as if nothing had happened. Richard occupied my chair without saying a word. Camilla served dinner with nervous movements, avoiding my gaze. I sat in a side chair like a second-class guest in what used to be my own family. Throughout the dinner, I observed how Peter addressed Richard with a respect he had never shown me. I watched how Camilla hung on every word from her parents. I saw how my grandchildren looked at me with sadness, not understanding why their father had humiliated their grandfather. And as I observed, I made a decision that would change our lives forever. The dinner proceeded in an atmosphere as thick as smoke. Every bite tasted like betrayal. Every laugh between Peter and Richard pierced my soul like daggers. My grandchildren tried to fill the silence with innocent comments about school, but even they realized that something fundamental had changed in our family. Matthew was selected for the school's math team, I commented, trying to regain some normalcy. Oh yeah, Peter replied without even looking at me, focused on serving more wine to Richard. Do you like the meat, Mr. Richard? It was as if I had become invisible. For 42 years, I raised this man, taught him values, principles, gave him everything I had and more. And now, he treated me like an uncomfortable stranger at his own table. When we finally finished eating, I discreetly asked for permission. I'm going to the bathroom for a moment. No one responded. No one even lifted their gaze from their brandy glasses and their business conversations in which I, the man who had built the family business from nothing, was not included. I walked to the bathroom with slow steps, but my mind raced at a dizzying speed. Once inside, I locked the door and looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back had red eyes, not from tears, but from a cold rage that was beginning to crystallize into pure determination. I took my phone and began dialing numbers I knew by heart. The first call was to Edward Santos, my personal lawyer for over 20 years. Victor, it's Christmas Eve. What's wrong? Edward, I need you to prepare documents tomorrow to revoke all the powers Peter has in the company. All of them, without exception. There was a long pause. Edward knew the structure of my businesses perfectly. Victor, are you sure? That would mean, I know exactly what it means. I also want you to cancel all the guarantees I've signed in his name. The house, the car, the corporate cards, everything. What happened? My son just showed me who he really is, and I'm going to show him who I am. The second call was to Marina Oliveira, my accountant and financial director. She also knew every financial move of the family. Marina, sorry to bother you on this date. I need you to freeze all joint accounts with Peter tomorrow morning. Suspend his salary and executive benefits. Is there any legal issue, Mr. Victor? No, Marina, I'm just reclaiming control of what belongs to me. The third call was the most important. I dialed Robert Almeida, my right-hand man in the company, a loyal man who had been with me from the beginning. Robert, forgive the hour. Could you go to the office early tomorrow? I need you to remove all of Peter's personal belongings from his office. You're firing him. He's no longer the CEO. You'll assume the position starting tomorrow. Prepare an immediate dismissal letter. Cause, loss of trust. Understood, Mr. Victor. Anything else? Yes. Put a note on his desk that says, "This office is not for you." I want him to understand the message perfectly. After the calls, I stayed in the bathroom a few more minutes, mentally organizing every move I would make. It wasn't revenge I sought. It was justice. For decades, I built a business empire. I sacrificed personal time. I worked 18 hours a day to give my family a comfortable life. And my own son had just shown that all that effort wasn't worth even basic respect. I returned to the living room with a serene smile that hid the storm raging inside me. The conversation continued without me, as if I had never existed. The European markets are very volatile, Richard commented while gesturing with his brandy glass. Exactly, Peter agreed enthusiastically. That's why we believe a merger between our companies would be beneficial. Those words hit me like lightning. A merger. They were planning to merge my company, the work of my entire life, with Richard's, without even consulting me. Merger? I asked with a controlled voice. Peter looked at me as if he had forgotten I was still there. Oh yes, Dad. Richard and I have been discussing expansion possibilities. Well, technically, I'm the CEO, he responded with an arrogant smile I'd never seen on his face. Technically, I repeated slowly, savoring each syllable. I see. Richard intervened with his calm, calculating voice. Victor, you understand that modern business requires fresh approaches? Peter has innovative ideas. I'm sure he does, I replied, maintaining my external composure while internally noting every word for the future reckoning. The children had already gone up to their rooms after dessert, oblivious to the drama unfolding among the adults. Camilla cleared the plates with mechanical movements, clearly uncomfortable but not daring to intervene in the conversation. I think it's time for me to go, I announced finally, standing up from the side chair where I had been relegated. Sure, Dad. Rest well, Peter responded, without lifting his gaze from his cigar. He didn't even bother to walk me to the door. It was Matthew who came running down the stairs when he heard I was leaving. You're leaving already, Grandpa. I thought you'd stay later, like always. No, dear, tonight I have important things to do. Are you angry about what happened? My grandson's question pierced my heart. Even a teenager had noticed the injustice of the situation. I'm not angry, Matthew. I'm disappointed, but sometimes disappointments teach us important truths. I don't understand. You'll understand soon, son. I love you very much. Remember that always. I left that house feeling strangely liberated. The cold December air filled my lungs as I walked to my car. In the driver's seat before starting the engine, I took my phone again. I had one last call to make. Mrs. Torres, this is Victor Mendez. Sorry for the bother on Christmas Eve, but I need to modify my will tomorrow. Yes, it's urgent, very urgent. As I drove home, a smile formed on my face for the first time all night. Peter had played his cards thinking he had control over the situation, but he had forgotten a fundamental detail. I was the one who had built the game board, and tomorrow he would discover the real rules. I arrived home near midnight, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. While the rest of the city celebrated Christmas, I prepared for the most important battle of my life. I turned on all the lights in my office and spread out on the oak desk all the legal documents I had accumulated over 4 decades of work. The first task was to meticulously review the corporate contracts. I needed to confirm something I suspected. Peter never had real equity in the company. He was CEO by my appointment, not by acquired right. All his authority depended on my will, and that will had just changed radically. While flipping through folders and files, my phone rang. It was Marina, my accountant. Mr. Victor, I've been reviewing the accounts since we spoke. There's something you need to know urgently. Tell me, Marina. Peter has been using the company's guarantees for personal expenses much larger than we imagined. The mansion where he lives has an $800,000 mortgage guaranteed by you. The sports car, $150,000. The corporate credit cards, over $300,000 in personal purchases. The information hit me like a slab. Is he in default on any payments? Several. Without your guarantees, it will be foreclosed immediately. The banks will start execution procedures tomorrow. Perfect. Cancel all guarantees at dawn. Are you sure? That will ruin his financial situation. Marina, my son just ruined something much more valuable. Our relationship. Now he'll learn about consequences. After hanging up, I continued reviewing documents until I found what I was looking for. Peter's employment contracts. My company, Mendez Construction, paid him a $12,000 monthly salary, plus benefits including a company car, private health insurance, representation expenses, and annual profit sharing. All that would disappear in a few hours. At 3 a.m., I called Robert. Boss, I couldn't sleep thinking about what you asked. Do you really want to do this? Robert, do you trust my judgment after all these years? Of course, Mr. Victor. You pulled me out of poverty and gave me opportunities I never dreamed of. Then trust me now. Peter crossed a line of no return. Go to the office early, remove his personal belongings, and put that note exactly as I said. And if he arrives while I'm doing it, even better. I want him to feel what it's like when someone takes your place. At 4 a.m., I reviewed the financial statements from the last 5 years. What I discovered filled me with rage and disappointment. Peter had diverted small sums to personal accounts for years. Nothing illegal, but ethically reprehensible. He had used company contacts to secure private contracts. He had charged commissions for recommending suppliers without informing me. My son hadn't just disrespected me that night. He had systematically betrayed my trust for years. At 5 a.m., I called Edward. Victor, I've been preparing the documents you requested, but I must warn you, this will have immediate legal consequences. Peter could sue you for wrongful dismissal. Edward, I have proof of fund diversions, misuse of corporate resources, and undeclared conflicts of interest. Do you think he'll want to go to court? I understand. The documents will be ready at 8 sharp. Perfect. Also prepare the papers to transfer ownership of the mansion on Central Avenue that's in his name. It was a wedding gift, but registered as a family loan. I want it back. The mansion where he lives now? Exactly. Let him learn to pay rent like any normal person. At 6 a.m., while making coffee, I received a message from Julia. Grandpa, Dad is very nervous. He stayed on the phone all night. Is everything okay? I replied, everything will be fine, dear. Your grandpa loves you very much. At 7 a.m., it was time for the most satisfying call of the entire operation. National Bank, this is Victor Mendez. I need to immediately cancel all guarantees I've signed in Peter Mendez's name. Yes, all of them. Mortgage, credits, cards, everything. Mr. Mendez, that means the payments will be executed immediately against the primary debtor. I know perfectly. Proceed. Very well. The cancellation documents will be processed in an hour. I must inform Mr. Mendez. No need. He'll find out very soon. At 8 a.m., Edward arrived at my house with all the prepared documents. I signed each paper with iron determination: cancellation of executive powers, revocation of banking authority, immediate cessation of CEO duties, recovery of assets loaned to the family. Victor, once you sign this, there's no turning back. Edward, a few hours ago my son pushed me to the floor in front of my grandchildren to give my seat to another man. Do you think there's turning back? I signed the last document at 8:30 a.m. At 9 sharp, I called Robert to confirm everything was ready at the office. Boss, I already removed all his things. The computer, diplomas, even the plant by the window. Everything's in boxes in the storage, and the note is placed exactly in the center of the desk as you asked. Perfect. When he arrives, let him in normally. Don't explain anything. Let him discover the situation himself. At 9:30, I received confirmation from Marina. Mr. Victor, all guarantees were officially canceled. The banks will start executions from 10 a.m. At 10:05, I put on my best suit. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day Peter Mendez would discover what the word consequences really meant. I poured myself one last cup of coffee and contemplated the dawn from my office window. After a sleepless night, I felt strangely energized. There was no trace of the sadness or pain from hours before, only a crystal-clear clarity about what had to be done. My phone was on silent, but I could see notifications piling up on the screen. Messages, missed calls, emails. The storm had begun. Peter was about to wake up to the worst day of his life, and I would be waiting to see his reaction when he finally understood that underestimating his father had been the most costly mistake of his existence. The war had begun, and I had all the weapons. Peter woke up that morning of December 25th with a strange feeling in his stomach. It wasn't the hangover from the previous night's brandy, but something deeper, as if his subconscious had picked up danger signals that his conscious mind hadn't yet processed. Camilla was already awake, preparing breakfast for the children with mechanical movements. The atmosphere in the house seemed tense, charged with an invisible electricity that no one mentioned but everyone felt. Later, Robert told me all the details of what happened that morning. Peter had received the first call at 10:15. Mr. Mendez, this is Marcia Cardoso from Atlantic Bank. We urgently need you to contact us regarding your mortgage. What's going on? My mortgage is up to date. Sir, the primary guarantee on your loan was cancelled this morning. Without that guarantee, the loan automatically becomes due immediately. Peter felt as if ice water had been poured over him. What guarantee? What are you talking about? The guarantee signed by Mr. Victor Mendez. Without it, you must settle the full debt, or we'll proceed with foreclosure. Before he could fully react, the phone rang again. Mr. Peter Mendez, Global Bank Risk Department. Your corporate credit line has been suspended due to cancellation of guarantees. You must come to our offices immediately. He hung up, and the phone rang again. Commercial Bank. Your corporate credit card has been blocked. Another call. Continental Finance. Preventive seizure procedure on. And another. Mercantile Bank. Immediate execution of. In 15 minutes, Peter received exactly 47 calls from different banks, insurance companies, car dealerships, and corporate suppliers. His financial world was crumbling in real time while he stood in his kitchen, still in pajamas. Camilla watched the scene with growing horror. "What's going on, Peter? Why so many calls?" "I don't know," he murmured, but deep down, a terrible suspicion was forming. My words from the previous night echoed in his memory. Technically, I'm the CEO. At 11 a.m., he decided to go straight to the company. He needed to understand what was happening and, more importantly, access corporate resources to deal with this unexpected crisis. He drove his BMW through the city, not knowing it would be one of the last times behind the wheel of that vehicle. The dealership had already received recovery orders for non-payment of the lease. Robert described to me in detail the moment Peter arrived at the Mendez construction building. The security guard greeted him normally, showing no signs that anything had changed. Peter took the elevator to the 5th floor where his CEO office was. As he stepped out of the elevator, he noticed something strange. Robert was in his office, sitting behind his desk, reviewing documents that clearly belonged to the executive files. "Robert, what are you doing in my office?" Robert looked up with an uncomfortable but firm expression. "Good morning, Peter. This is no longer your office." "What do you mean it's not my office? What are you talking about?" "Read the letter on the desk." Peter approached and saw, placed exactly in the center of the wooden surface, a handwritten note in my unmistakable handwriting. "This office is not for you." The words hit him like physical punches. It was the same phrase he had used the night before, but now directed at him. He felt his knees weaken. "Robert, this must be a joke." "It's not a joke, Peter. Mr. Victor appointed me CEO this morning. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal items from storage and leave the building. This is impossible. I'm the CEO. I've spent years building this company with my father." "Not anymore, Peter. The dismissal documents are officially filed. Causes, loss of trust, and conflict of interest." Peter felt the world spinning around him. He picked up the phone to call me, but before he could dial, Robert handed him a sealed envelope. "Mr. Victor asked me to give you this." With trembling hands, Peter opened the envelope. Inside was a typewritten letter on company letterhead. "Peter, the consequences of our actions sometimes arrive when we least expect them. Last night, you taught me that my place in your life no longer exists. Today, I teach you that your place in my company doesn't either. You have until noon to vacate any property in my name. The mansion on Central Avenue, the car, everything. You'll learn to live on your own resources, as you should have done years ago. Don't look for me, don't call me, don't try intermediaries. This decision is final and irrevocable. Your father, who no longer recognizes you, Victor Mendez." Peter read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. It wasn't just the job, it was everything. His home, his car, his lifestyle, his financial security, all gone in a single morning. "Robert, you have to help me. You know my father for years. This is temporary madness." "Peter, I saw what you did to him last night. My own wife was outraged when I told her. Mr. Victor is the fairest man I know, but also the most determined. When he makes a decision, there's no turning back. But I'm his son, his only son. You were his son. Last night, you chose to be something else." Peter left the corporate building like a sleepwalker. In the parking lot, he found a tow truck hooking up his BMW. The driver showed him a court order for recovery due to non-payment. "Wait, there must be a mistake." "No mistake, sir. The lease is overdue and without guarantees. The vehicle will be recovered immediately." Peter had to walk to the nearest subway station, something he hadn't done in years. During the journey back home, his phone didn't stop ringing. Banks, creditors, suppliers, all demanding immediate payments. When he finally arrived at the mansion, he found Camilla crying on the sofa with a court notice in her hands. "Peter, we have 24 hours to leave the house. They're foreclosing the mortgage." "What?" "My father canceled all the guarantees. We owe $800,000 that we don't have." Peter collapsed into a chair, completely defeated. In less than 12 hours, he had lost his job, his car, his home, and his economic stability. And worst of all, he had lost his father. The words he had uttered the previous night now echoed like a curse. "This seat is for Camilla's father. Go." Now it was he who was out of everything. While my plan unfolded, I remained in my office receiving regular updates from Robert, Marina, and Edward. Each new report confirmed that Peter was experiencing exactly what I had planned, the total collapse of his privileged world. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Richard Vasconcelos. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won out. "Victor, I hope I'm not bothering you." "It depends on the reason for the call, Richard." "I want to apologize for what I witnessed last night. Peter's behavior was unacceptable, and I feel partially responsible for not intervening immediately." His voice sounded sincere, which surprised me. For years, Richard had been a silent competitor, never an ally. "I appreciate the call, Richard, but you don't have to apologize. It wasn't you who pushed me. Still, I feel terrible for taking your seat. I want you to know I never imagined something like that would happen." There was a pause before he continued. "Actually, Victor, there's another reason for my call. I understand you've taken severe measures against Peter today." I immediately went on guard. "How do you know that?" "The business world is small. News travels fast. What Peter did is unforgivable, but it also reveals something about his character that I hadn't perceived before." "And what would that be?" "That he can't be trusted. Victor, any man capable of treating his own father that way is not someone I'd like to do business with." I felt a wave of satisfaction realizing that Richard was canceling the potential merger with the company, now just my company. "I understand your position. In fact, I'd like to propose something different. Instead of working with Peter, I'd prefer to explore partnership possibilities directly with you. I've always admired your business vision, even when we competed." That took me by surprise. The man my son had tried to impress at my expense was now offering me a partnership. The irony was almost poetic. "It's an interesting proposal, Richard. We can discuss it after the dust settles. Of course, no rush. And Victor, it was very smart of you to keep absolute control of the company all these years." After hanging up, I sat thinking about this unexpected twist. Peter had sacrificed our relationship to gain Richard's approval, and now he had lost both. The consequences of his actions continued to multiply. At 3 p.m., Edward called with new updates. "Victor, the eviction notices have already been delivered. Peter has 24 hours to leave the mansion." "Any reaction from him?" "He tried to contest it, but when we presented the evidence of financial diversions, he gave up quickly. He knows he can't win this legal battle." With each new piece of information, I expected to feel some remorse, some paternal hesitation, but all I felt was a strange sense of justice. It wasn't revenge driving me, but a deep need to establish boundaries that had never been set before. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from regret, but from the energy still pulsing in my veins. For the first time in years, I had taken total control of my life again. I had eliminated the only person who made me feel vulnerable, the only one capable of hurting me deeply. As I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, I remembered Carla, my late wife. What would she say about all this? She had always been more indulgent with Peter, more willing to forgive his small faults. But even Carla, with all her kindness, would never have tolerated what happened on Christmas Eve. "You did what you had to do," I could almost hear her say. "Peter needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around him." The next day brought more news. Camilla had called her parents begging for financial help. Helen was willing to help, but Richard surprisingly refused. "My daughter and my grandchildren will always have my support," he reportedly said, "but I won't finance the lifestyle of a man who treats his own father that way." Richard's transformation from potential partner of Peter to my ally was fascinating. Not only was he denying help to my son, he was explicitly condemning his actions. It was as if the respect Peter tried to earn by humiliating me had turned into exactly the opposite. 3 days after the Christmas disaster, Matthew called me. His voice sounded worried, more adult than his 15 years. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "I'm fine, dear. And you? How are things at home?" There was a significant pause. "Complicated. Mom is nervous all the time. Dad barely leaves his room. They think I don't know, but I overheard an argument. We'll have to move to a small apartment downtown." I felt a pang of guilt thinking about my grandchildren facing the consequences of Peter's actions. They were innocent in this story. Matthew, I want you to know that my love for you and Julia hasn't changed at all. What happened between your father and me is adult stuff. I know, Grandpa. Julia is scared, but I explained that you're not angry with us. You're a very smart boy, Matthew. Grandpa, what Dad did was really bad, right? The question was simple but loaded with complexity. How to explain to a teenager the depth of the betrayal I had felt. Your father hurt me a lot, Matthew. It wasn't just pushing me physically, but the disrespect it represented. When you grow up, you'll understand that some actions have consequences we can't erase. Do you think he'll learn the lesson? That was the question I asked myself. Peter had always been protected from the consequences of his actions. From childhood, his charm and position as an only child guaranteed easy forgiveness for almost everything. Maybe that's exactly what had turned him into the man he was. I hope so, Matthew. Sometimes we need to lose everything to understand the value of what we had. After hanging up, I reflected on the unexpected wisdom my grandson showed. Even at 15, he could see the basic justice of the situation clearly. Children often have an innate sense of right and wrong that adults complicate with elaborate justifications. That night, I made an important decision. Although I couldn't forgive Peter, I wouldn't allow my grandchildren to suffer unnecessarily for his mistakes. I called my lawyer with new instructions. Edward, I want to set up an educational fund for Matthew and Julia, completely separate from anything related to Peter or Camilla. A fund that guarantees their education no matter what happens with their parents. Understood, Victor? I'll prepare the documents. Any specific clauses? Yes. The money can only be used for education, health, or the children's direct well-being. Peter and Camilla can't have access to it under any circumstances. It was my way of separating my love for my grandchildren from the need to set clear boundaries with my son. I was still a grandfather, even if I no longer felt like a father. January arrived with the typical cold and the quiet that follows the end-of-year holidays. A week after the incident, I heard that Peter, Camilla, and the children had moved to a small rented apartment downtown. The contrast with the mansion they lived in before couldn't be more dramatic. Robert kept me informed about the rumors circulating in business circles. The story of Peter Mendez's fall had spread quickly, becoming a warning to other executives who underestimated their corporate patriarchs. Curiously, my reputation had strengthened. I was no longer just the competent widower who continued his wife's legacy. Now I was the relentless businessman who tolerated no disrespect, not even from his own son. Weeks turned into months, and the wound in my heart began to heal, though never completely. I dedicated myself entirely to the company, implementing projects I had postponed for years. The partnership with Richard Vasconcelos was developing surprisingly positively. Our management styles, once competitive, proved complementary when aligned on common goals. In mid-March, Marina brought me information about Peter's financial situation. Mr. Victor, I got some data through common contacts. Peter is working as an administrative assistant in a small construction firm on the other side of the city. The salary is 1/10 of what he earned with us. I absorbed the information in silence. Part of me felt a bitter satisfaction, but another part, the one that still held memories of the child Peter had been, felt a pang of sadness. He still has considerable financial difficulties. Most banks refuse to work with him due to previous defaults. He and Camilla have sold practically everything of value they owned, and the children, from what I know, had to change schools. They can no longer afford the international school's tuition. That information deeply unsettled me. I immediately called Edward and instructed that the educational fund I had created for my grandchildren be activated to cover their school expenses. The children shouldn't suffer for their father's mistakes. In April, I received unexpected news through Helen Vasconcelos, whom I had met at a charity event. Victor, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I think you have the right to know. Camilla filed for divorce. I was genuinely surprised. Why? She said she no longer recognizes the man she married, that the financial disaster only revealed a side of Peter she can't accept. The last straw was when he sold her engagement ring to pay rent without even consulting her. The news resonated in me in a complex way. Peter was reaping the consequences of his actions in every sphere of his life. And the children will stay with Camilla, of course. Peter will have weekend visits when he has a suitable place to receive them. I realized that the empire Peter had lost wasn't just financial or professional, it was also familial. In one night of arrogance, he had started a domino effect that now destroyed every pillar of his previous existence. In May, when the first spring flowers began to color the city, I received a letter. The envelope was simple, the kind bought at any neighborhood stationery store. I immediately recognized Peter's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me feared finding bitter accusations or manipulative pleas. Another part, the one that would never completely stop being a father, hoped it wasn't that. "Dear Victor," the letter began, without the usual dad or any familial intimacy. "I know I have no right to address you, and I fully respect your decision not to want contact with me. This letter doesn't seek a response or reconciliation. I simply need to say some things I've learned during these months that changed my life forever." The formality and respectful tone surprised me. There was no trace of the arrogance I knew so well. For 42 years, I believed I deserved everything I had just for being your son. Now I understand that I deserve nothing simply for being born with privileges. Respect is earned through actions, not surnames. Dignity is built with character, not bank accounts. The words seem sincere, not calculated for gain. There's no excuse for what I did. Pushing you to the floor in front of my children was the most cowardly and cruel act of my life. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice to prioritize my social image over your dignity. It was pure betrayal, and I deserved exactly the consequences I received. I felt my eyes filling with tears, not from sadness, but from a strange mix of relief and recognition. Peter finally seemed to understand. I'm not writing expecting forgiveness. Forgiveness must be earned through years of consistent behavior, not pretty words on paper. Nor am I writing expecting you to change your decision about our relationship. I fully respect your choice and understand it's fair and necessary. The letter continued for several pages, detailing not his sufferings or losses, but his inner growth process. He described his current job not as humiliation, but as an education in dignity. He explained his modest apartment not as punishment, but as a lesson in self-sufficiency. If we never speak again, I want you to know that I've become a better person thanks to the consequences you imposed. Not in spite of them, but because of them. That's a gift more valuable than any material inheritance. You gave me the opportunity to discover my own worth, separate from your achievements and generosity. The letter ended with a simple signature. With deep respect and eternal love, your son, who is finally growing up, Peter. I kept the letter in my desk and spent the rest of the day absorbing its content. It wasn't emotional manipulation disguised as remorse. It was the genuine recognition of a man finally facing the consequences of a lifetime of unquestioned privileges. That night, I took a sheet of paper and wrote a brief response. Peter, I received your letter and read it several times. I'm glad to know you're well and growing as a person. That growth is exactly what I hope for. I'm not ready to resume a personal relationship, and maybe I never will be, but I want you to know I'm proud of the man you're choosing to be. Keep on that path, Victor. It was the most I could offer at that moment. It wasn't forgiveness, but acknowledgement. It wasn't reconciliation, but respect. And for someone who had lost everything, perhaps it was enough to continue building a new life on foundations more solid than inherited privilege. December returned, marking a full year since the night that had changed our lives forever. Christmas lights illuminated the city, bringing bittersweet memories that I tried to keep in perspective. Over those 12 months, I had observed Peter's transformation from afar, mainly through sporadic reports from my grandchildren. According to Matthew, his father had changed completely. He seems calmer now, Grandpa. He's not always chasing something, and he really listens when we talk. The company thrived under my renewed leadership, and the partnership with Richard had proven surprisingly fruitful. We had started 3 major joint projects, expanding our operations beyond regional borders. Ironically, the merger Peter had planned behind my back ended up happening, but on very different terms and without his involvement. The week before Christmas, I received an unexpected call from Camilla. Our relationship had been cordial but distant, mainly because of the children. "Victor, I hope I'm not bothering you in any way." "Camilla, how can I help you?" "It's about Christmas. The children and I would very much like to invite you to dinner with us on Christmas Eve." I hesitated, imagining if Peter would be there. As if reading my thoughts, Camilla continued, "Peter won't be there. He understands his presence would be uncomfortable for you. He'll spend time with the children the next day." I was touched by the consideration. "In that case, I accept gladly." "Thank you, Victor. It means a lot to us, especially to the children." After hanging up, I reflected on how the roles had reversed. A year ago, I was the uncomfortable guest at my own son's table. Now he was the one stepping aside to give me space. On Christmas Eve, I drove to the small apartment where Camilla and the children now lived. It was a modest place but cozy, decorated with simplicity and good taste. When I arrived, Matthew and Julia ran to hug me with the same spontaneity as always, as if the abyss that had opened in our family had never existed for them. The dinner was simple, very different from the opulence of the previous year, but infinitely warmer and more genuine. Camilla had prepared everything with evident care, and the children proudly showed me their contributions. Julia had made the dessert, and Matthew the table decoration. During the meal, we talked about their everyday lives, school, their dreams. Peter wasn't mentioned directly at any point, but his presence floated like an unplayed note in a familiar melody. When the children retired to watch a Christmas movie, Camilla and I stayed alone in the small dining room. "Victor, there's something I need to tell you." Her serious tone put me on alert. "Peter has really changed. It's not a farce or a temporary strategy. He works honestly, lives modestly, and has dedicated himself to being a better father to the children." I nodded, not quite knowing how to respond. "I know what he did is unforgivable. I myself couldn't stay married to him after seeing what he was capable of. But I think he deserves for you to know that your lesson had the desired effect." "I'm glad to hear that, Camilla. I never wanted to destroy him, just for him to understand the consequences of his actions." She smiled slightly. "Well, he certainly understood. Sometimes when I see how he is now, more humble, more attentive, more genuine, I almost don't recognize the man I married." I stayed silent, absorbing her words. "He never mentioned trying a reconciliation with you." I shook my head. "Not directly. I get news of him through the children, and we've exchanged some formal letters, but nothing more. I think he's afraid. Not of you, but of not deserving a second chance." Her words stayed with me as I drove home that night. Peter was afraid of not deserving a second chance. I myself was afraid of offering one and regretting it later. Fear, I realized, was what kept us trapped in that emotional impasse. On Christmas Day, I received a small package by mail. Inside was a handmade wooden box, clearly crafted by hand with finely carved details. Next to it, a simple card, "Merry Christmas," made with my own hands in evening carpentry classes. "I hope it can serve to store your special memories. With respect, Peter." I examined the box carefully. It wasn't perfect. There were small imperfections revealing the hand of a beginner, but it was evidently made with care and dedication. My son, who before only valued luxury items and status, was now creating something with his own hands. I spent the rest of the day thinking about that symbolic gift. Peter wasn't asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. He was simply showing me in a tangible way the person he was becoming. A week later, I made a decision. I wasn't ready to fully resume our relationship, but perhaps it was time for a small step. I called Matthew. "Grandpa, everything okay?" "Everything's fine, dear. Can I speak with your father, please?" There was a surprised silence on the other end, followed by movement noises. Then Peter's hesitant voice. "Hello, Peter. It's Victor." Victor. Did something happen?" "I received your gift, the wooden box." "Ah, yes. I hope you liked it. It's not anything sophisticated, but it's beautiful, more beautiful than anything you could have bought." Another silence. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." "Peter, Maybe we can meet someday, perhaps for coffee, to talk. The response took so long I thought the call had dropped. I'd love that, whenever you want. How about next week, Tuesday at 3 p.m. at the Central Cafe? I'll be there. Thank you for the opportunity. After hanging up, I wasn't sure if I'd made the right decision. I wasn't ready to fully forgive or forget, but maybe I was ready to see for myself the man my son had become. The following Tuesday, I arrived at the cafe a few minutes before the agreed time. I chose a discreet table at the back of the establishment and ordered an espresso to calm my nerves. Peter arrived punctually, wearing simple but clean clothes, very different from the expensive suits he used to wear. There was something different in his posture, less arrogance, more awareness. When our eyes met, I saw something in his that I hadn't seen in decades, genuine humility. "Thank you for coming," he said simply, sitting across from me. "Thank you for the invitation," I replied, keeping the formal tone we had established in our letters. For a moment, we sat in silence, two strangers connected by blood but separated by a December night that had changed everything. "How's your work going?" I asked finally. "Honest, sometimes difficult but honest. I'm learning things I should have learned a long time ago." I nodded, appreciating the simplicity of his response. "And the carpentry?" A small smile appeared on his face. "It's therapeutic. It transforms wood into something useful, just as I'm trying to transform my life." Our conversation flowed slowly, carefully, like two explorers in unknown terrain. We didn't talk about the past or make promises for the future. We just shared small glimpses of the present, tacitly acknowledging that any rebuilding would have to start from scratch. When we said goodbye an hour later, there were no hugs or dramatic declarations, just a silent agreement that perhaps one day we could find a new kind of relationship, not based on financial dependence or unmet expectations, but on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. As I drove home, I reflected on the journey of the last year. I had lost a son as I knew him, but perhaps I was gaining a more authentic version of him. Peter had lost everything he valued superficially, but he was finding something deeper and more lasting: personal dignity. The consequences I imposed weren't just punishment. They were an opportunity for growth that he would never have sought voluntarily. And although the path to reconciliation, if there was one, would be long and uncertain, I finally felt at peace with the decisions I made that Christmas Eve a year ago. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't protecting someone from consequences, but allowing them to happen so the person can finally grow beyond their own self-imposed limits. Now, if you like this story, click on the next video that appears on the screen, because in it there's a story of betrayal and turnaround like you've never seen before. Yeah,